I am.
All right, quiet on set. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Brony Debates Live. I hope you're all doing well out there. I hope you had a wonderful week. And I'm looking forward to a good conversation tonight. I'm looking forward to a really good weekend. And I hope you all got some fun plans for your weekend as well. We're going to get the weekend started off the right way with some theory on storytelling in general and how it should be done. So these are some of my favorite kinds of topics here. And for that, let me just give you sort of the rundown here. Is The question was posed to us, as you might see through the thumbnail there, through my longtime patron Alisia Lanet. She's been on the show before. She did a wonderful job the last time she was on, and she wanted to know, should your message overtake your story? So that sort of means, in a sense of, when you're telling a story that's meant to deliver a moral of some kind. Say, the majority of episodes of Friendship is Magic. A lot of cartoons that came out within the last 20 years or so, actually. Um, how apparent should that be, and how important should it be, and how ham-fisted should it be? Like, how much should you what is a spoon feed it to the audience versus just weaving it into the dialogue, giving some subtle hints at it? Well, we're going to talk about that tonight. Now, originally, we were going to have Mr. Pony Cordero with us as well. I don't know where he is. He didn't show up to the debate. So we got these guys, and it's still going to be a lovely panel. We still got our good friend Mr. DJ Skywalker with us tonight. How are you doing, DJ?
Everyone, I'm here to talk about controversial stuff.
Oh, good. I like controversy. Controversy makes me happy. And I brought on some people that I felt might have some differing opinions to DJ and I. These being my good friend Bright Idea and her other half, Mr. Raby. So, Bright Idea, how are you doing today?
Very bright tonight, but that's my normal state, so nothing new here.
Alrighty then. For someone who's got bright in her name, your color palette is actually kind of muted, just a tad on the
A
dull
little.
side. But
Yeah, well, that's what the yellow's for.
yeah. And you know something? I didn't notice that until now, so I'd say it works. And you brought along your boyfriend. So,
Yes.
Mr. Raby, please introduce yourself to our stream and tell us a little bit about yourself. Welcome and thanks for coming on such short notice. How are you doing tonight?
Fairly well. Rolling a Constitution save on a cold here.
Yes.
Ah, well, the best thing you can do that I recommend is get outside. Vitamin D from the sunlight is amazing for your immune system. And just yeah, a little bit of exercise. Make sure you're eating right. I'm sure you'll be just fine. We kick the cold's butt every year. So
Mm-hmm.
now then, before we get much further into it, I should give a shout out to my very generous supporters on Patreon who make my content possible, who make paying my bills possible, and I'm especially grateful on those who are in the $10 and up tier. Here's this big long list that I have to name off right now. We've got Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden Girder, Senko, Kyle Christensen, Mr. DJ Skywalker, who's joining us, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, Princess Sunshine Sparkle, Bootleg Bard, Pony Cordero, who should have been here tonight, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. They all have their own content that's linked in the description. I highly suggest you check that out. On the off chance you're not already subscribed to Bright Idea, please do that as well. If you would like to be on this show, I would love to have you. We just need you to get on that Patreon. It's as little as $1 a month. You can pledge however much you want. It helps, every little bit helps. I'm grateful for all of it. We get you into the server. And from there, it's you get priority on your topic suggestions for Brony Debates. And if you suggest the topic and we pick it, I invite you on the show as well. Now then, while we're doing this, while we're talking, if this is your first time reading us, but I see a lot of familiar names in the chat here. I'm reading the chat. Feel free to interact with us however you see fit. We're going to be watching your comments and questions in the chat and address them at the end of the stream. With that being said, I've got an opening statement from Alisia, who suggested tonight's topic. Let's see here. She says, if you keep the topic I came up with, my stance is that story should come first. You can have a message in mind, but it won't be as good if that message isn't flush with the world and comes across as a blunt hammer with overtaking the story. Whereas you can want to deliver a message, but keep in mind as you focus on the story, keep that in mind as you focus on the story and what events will happen. That way the events can play out naturally and the message desired can be shown through the events in the story to the characters. Okay, so let's start off with some opening statements. We've got a little bit of a starting point with Alicia's opening statement there. So DJ, what do you think? Should message overtake story?
In my opinion, no. What Alisia said is completely correct. Is that you start with a story, maybe you can implement a message later, but your message is never going to get through if your story isn't good. So story always comes first.
Interesting. Bright idea. What do you think?
Inclined to very much agree with Alisia on this case of, yeah, you can have a message in mind, but story definitely should come first, and the characters and the world that they live in, and the message could come from what they're trying to accomplish in the story, but it should be subtly used and be character driven, and rather than, well, you can be plot driven as well, but like it should be character motivated.
Interesting. And Raby, how do you feel about the topic?
Well, my thinking is that message and story can never be teased apart. Messaging is story, whether you're conscious of it or not. Any story you tell is going to send a message. It's just a question of how well you convey that message and what message you're sending. And so it's better to be conscious of your message than not conscious of it.
Interesting. So how often does it happen then that you're unconscious of your own message?
I've seen a few videos from, for example, the Extra Credits channel where someone tries to tell a simple shoot 'em up story in a video game and they accidentally perpetuate problematic messages of someone might tell a Super Mario story and perpetuate the message of the damsel in distress.
Okay.
Or someone, yeah, that's just a simple example.
Okay, so let's break that down then. What exactly is a problematic message and why is it problematic?
A problematic message is one that is untrue and or hurtful.
Okay. So can you give me an example?
I think an example that Extra Credits gave was a game title that they didn't even link to because they didn't want to give it the traffic, called Call of Juarez, where it was some basic shooter title that had simple, like, brothel scenes of sorts where they were perpetuating fears of Mexicans kidnapping American girls when the truth is Mexican girls were often getting kidnapped and shipped to America, and just showing the reverse without even questioning it was perpetuating fears and prejudices against Mexicans.
Alrighty then. So I've got a few things to say about that, but first I want to hear from DJ. DJ, do you have anything to what do you think about the points that Raby has just made?
I see where he's coming from, but I'm not sure how to word it. I can't bring myself to agree with that line of thinking, mostly because I don't. It's that whole thing with the unconscious part, which that whole thing I don't agree with. Is unconscious messaging is subjective to the viewer. That's not. I don't always consider that an issue on the writer's part.
So
that's more personal interpretation.
Yeah. So it sounds like, DJ, you're taking the death of the author approach. Well, I think Raby really is taking the death of the author approach to it, where the author, once it's put out, no longer really has control over how the story is interpreted and what other people get from it. And you're saying that the intention of the author is important. Is that a fair assumption on my part?
Yes, especially when we're talking messaging. It has to be something from the author. It can't... Messaging... In this kind of topic, the messaging has to be purposeful. And if it's unconsciously in there, that's not purposeful. That's a personal interpretation that may not even be true.
So why does it have to be purposeful?
I suspect Carl Jung might be able to shed some light on that. He was the one who pioneered the whole idea of collective unconscious, and where Joseph Campbell got his material when he wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces. That someone might be drawing from different tropes or different archetypes or different things they've seen on TV or whatever, that is all drawing from a collective set of storytelling tools that by themselves pose their own message, even if the author isn't aware of that message when they're using those tools.
Right, and that would be death of the author. But DJ is saying that in order for it to really perpetuate anything, it has to be intentional by the author, and I'm asking DJ why.
Well, because if it's not in there by the author, then it's just a story. There is no message. It's just someone telling a story. If there's not a message in there on purpose, then the message people are getting is by their own interpretation, which in this context, I don't believe qualifies, I suppose.
So let me add this to what DJ is saying here. In Christianity, we've got the parables, right? And the parables, and I see somebody else in the chat. Who was it? It was Rusty. Rusty Helm is saying, Jesus often spoke in parables for a reason. So the parables were stories that were meant to have a very specific meaning to them. And when you're training to become a priest, you actually have to know the one meaning of these parables. It's extremely important, and the reason being, from Jesus himself saying, yes, you can interpret what I say any way you like, but that's not what I said. The parables have one meaning, because if they don't have only one meaning, then they can mean anything. And when they mean anything, they mean nothing. It's that whole, syndrome thing. When everyone is super, no one is super. Because you can just say, you can take any example of a story. Say, Bright, give me just the first Friendship is Magic episode to come off at the top of your head.
Suited for Success.
Suited for Success. Let me tell you about how Suited for Success was really about, it just, all it did was promote, was show us the bright side of communism and why the whole world should adopt it, right? And I'm sure if I tried hard enough, I could write a video and I could convince at least one person in the audience that's what Suited for Success is really about. And Lauren Foss pulled the wool over our eyes for a good long decade. But that doesn't mean that's what. If I went and took that to Lauren Foss and said, "Here's my essay on why Suited for Success was really about the Communist Manifesto," and I'm on you, she would take that script and beat me to death with it. That's why.
Yeah. Then wonder how you got in her house.
Message. Yeah.
Oh, getting in the house was the easy part.
Oh no!
Oh boy!
Don't say that.
Yeah, that was a bad joke, Brony. Don't do that.
Breaking and entering Brony. It's canon.
No.
It is. I'm going to aside for just a second. It actually is. I've got a really... people that know me well know that I have a bad habit, especially of when I get excited, of entering a room with a big group of people in it to give my news of whatever I'm excited about through the wall. Instead of using the perfectly good door that's right there. I just... right through the wall for some reason. I don't know why I do it. I just find it hilarious. So...
good news, everyone.
Yeah. Boom! Good news, everyone. So that's me agreeing with DJ in the long form of why author intention is important. And another thing here is that I don't think you can have problematic messages like that in your narrative, because here's the thing: is that things like that actually happen, right? And they happen everywhere, regardless of nationality, regardless of time period. Tell me a little bit more about it. You said it was Call of Juarez. I believe I've heard of that game before. But in order to really get into the meat and potatoes of your point there, Raby, I'm going to need to know just a little bit more about this game. Who are the main characters? When did this take place? What kind of game was it? Was it meant to be historical fiction? Was it meant to be a fantasy? Things like that. So what can you tell me to give me a little bit more context here?
I think he's doing a search on his phone right now.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is find the extra credits video where I heard about it.
Okay, well, I don't really care what extra credits thinks. If I wanted to know what extra credits thinks, I would have brought him on the show. I got you on the show, though, so I want to care what you think. But while you're... And another thing is... try not to let other people tell you how you feel about something. I feel like it's better to come up with your own conclusions. But while you're doing that, because all I need is a little bit more information so I can deliver my point. Bright, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. Can you weigh in on any of the stuff that we're saying?
Well, I think it's interesting that you're talking about unintended messages, because what if the message of the story is nuanced and has a lot of layers to it?
Ooh,
so you might be saying one thing, but you're also saying something, and you can interpret it with like even further implications.
Can you give me an example?
Well, let's see. I just started Raby on watching Infinity Train. Are you familiar with that animated show?
I've heard about it. I haven't seen it.
Okay, so say in the first season, So in the first season, it's basically the main character, Tulip. She's going through, her parents are going through a divorce, and so she's kind of tuning out to the problem. She's just focused on wanting to go to coding camp. And so she gets on this train, which kind of in a Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland type way, take her through a series of adventures that kind of shows why the way she's dealing with her problem isn't healthy or helpful. So it has some very nice layered messages in there. And like one of them is just like seeing, like dealing with your problems and instead of ignoring them. That's like one message to take away from that first season.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so why is that? Why is something that has multiple layers significant to what we're talking about here?
Well, it's not really that it overtakes the story, but like different audiences watching can come to different conclusions after watching it.
Yes, which is what I'm sorry. Go ahead, Raby.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a multi-layered message is, and a more nuanced message at that, is often evidence of more conscious versus unconscious messaging. Like, I've read that character arcs for characters like on Infinity Train often start their story by believing some kind of falsehood that's holding them back from whatever conflict they're in, and little by little chipping away at that false belief until at the apotheosis of the story, when they finally are able to resolve the conflict, it's because they've been able to drop the false belief entirely. A good example of this might be Inside Out, where the character... Are you familiar with that film?
No,
Pixar's Inside Out.
yes, I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I've never seen it start to finish.
Yeah, well, the basic gist is basic kid story of schoolgirl moves away from her old home because her family got a new job somewhere, and she's struggling to adapt. And the story focuses on kind of the core 5 psychological emotions of joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And each of those emotions becomes a character in the story in a kind of homunculus style vision of the child's mind. And the character of Joy has a kind of... She starts the story believing a falsehood. That falsehood being that sadness, one of her fellow core emotions, is bad. That there is no place for sadness anywhere, anytime. Have as little of it as possible. Shove it away, lock it up, whatever you have to do. Just don't feel sadness, whatever you do.
Just be happy all the time.
Yeah. And over the course of the story, we see her attempts at locking sadness up backfire. We see her slowly start to see that sadness can be useful. The character of sadness helps her solve certain problems along the way. And by the climax of the story, she finally realizes, oh, sadness isn't necessarily bad. Sadness can be useful, and sometimes you need to feel sad in order to feel happy again. And that is her core character arc. Going from sadness is bad to sadness can be good. And that arc often shows the core message of the story of this film as a whole.
Okay. So that, in my definition, would be an example of when the story and the message weave together. It sounds fairly balanced. And from what I've seen, it was fairly balanced. DJ, I'm curious to know what you think about what Raby just said there.
Well, I did see Inside Out once. I've never really gone back to it because I didn't much care for the movie itself, but it was one of those ones where it had a message to say, but the story itself was also really well told. Which, as I said before, is where I think is the most important part. Because people got the message because the story was really well told. Even if there are multiple ones, they came through the story. Because without it, you're just throwing it at people, and people are going to just tune out because you're treating them like infants.
Yeah, generally, I'm going to cut in here and say this is that when you have a message that you're trying to deliver, if you become ham-fisted in any way, you're going to end up alienating most of your audience for one of two reasons. It's going to depend on the individual. One thing is people don't like being talked down to. If they feel like you're just slamming it in their face, if you're doing all but breaking the fourth wall and saying through your character this is what you should believe or this is how you should act, then you're going to reverse psychology people. And they're not going to, it's going to get lost. Whatever you're trying to say is going to get lost because you're just being so obnoxious with your points. That's one. The other one is just people don't like being talked down to in that way. Even children, are more well, I shouldn't say even children. I should say, toddlers are can have the capacity to be more intelligent than that. Where if you talk down to them that way, they're just gonna blow you off. So you lose people like that. It's also just boring. Why would when I come somewhere for some kind of entertainment, I want to be entertained. And if I learn something along the way, then that's cool. Especially if a piece of media makes me think about something I never thought about before or consider a perspective that I've never seen before. But if you just come up to me and say, something that's completely contradictory to something that I believe or that I've believed for a long time, I'm not going to believe you. But if you show me the context in which it works, I'm going to be a lot more likely to believe in it in one way or another. And it might not completely change my mind on a topic. That's a long process, if possible for some people at all. It depends on the person. But then that makes me just sort of question reality whenever I come to a fork in the road that's like that. Then I have practical examples of things I've seen in my life where I could say, okay, I can take this path, and if I make these decisions with this mindset in this context, that will happen. Or this show that I watched, or this book that I read, or this friend that I knew told me about another time where they went the other direction and reached we'll just say a favorable conclusion. Everything worked out in the end with a method that I would have never considered. Now I at least gotta stop and think, and thus my worldview has expanded, and I'm a lot more likely as a person to be more accepting of other people that don't really conform to what I know. Now and I've got some personal experience in doing just that myself, but that's also just a general human psychology thing. So let's go, now that I've gotten done ranting here, I'm just going to open up the floor. What do you guys think about that? So that's my side on whether or not something's overtaking a story. Raby, what were you about to say?
Yeah, I think you just described what a lot of Brony reviewers have said on basic narrative, the quality of show don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
The reason mythology and storytelling is so pervasive in society and has been for thousands of years is because narrative is how we process information.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've certainly been seeing it in the real world of, like, I might tell someone a statistic that says do this or do that, and more often than not, people either aren't going to understand the statistic or are going to do the exact opposite.
Right, their eyes are either going to roll or they're going to glaze over.
Yeah, but if I tell someone a story of those statistics playing out, well, then they would be more likely to listen, and it may not happen right away, but it does happen.
Mm-hmm. So in that case, when we're dealing with things like that, and let's keep it within the confines of entertainment media, is the message overtaking the story when you're doing that? Bright, what do you think about that question?
Well, when a message overtakes the story, when it becomes like center stage, front and center, then you have to be really careful and have it make sense to the characters Like, you have to focus on how the characters feel about it or how it affects the world versus talking directly to the audience. Because, like, the audience is just observing, they're watching, they're tuning into this world. They don't expect to be talked to directly. Like, that's my feeling on it.
Okay, and
That's
DJ, what do you think?
I think Raby was going to say something.
All right, go ahead, Raby.
Going to respond to Bright on how it does beg the question about ASOPs, of when something explicitly delivers the message and talks directly to the audience.
Right. Well, that usually happens at the end. And that's acceptable because, like, okay, the story is done. Now what do you think?
Yeah. No, it doesn't always work.
Right.
I mean, we were talking about Romeo and Juliet, for instance, where I think they did attempt an Aesop of never was there a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. The explicit message being teenagers shouldn't be going and marrying each other.
Yeah.
But the message that we seem to get is completely different. We read it in the 20th, 21st century and say love conquers all.
Or communication is important.
Saying love conquers, I don't care what time period you're in. If you read, I should say watch. If you watch Romeo and Juliet, because it's a play. If you're reading Shakespeare, you're doing it wrong. If you watch Romeo and Juliet and think to yourself, wow, love conquers all, you messed up. That you are wrong, sir.
Those are the same people that think Joker and Harley have a good relationship.
Oh my God!
Oh
thank
yeah,
you.
it's so wrong. Like, don't go for Joker and Harley Quinn. Go for Gomez and Morticia Addams.
Yes.
I think we can all agree on that.
I think we all agree on that.
Da-da-da-da.
Right. So, DJ, what do you think about all this? I haven't heard from you in a little bit.
Oh, there was so much stuff there. I forgot which one we were tracking at the moment.
Okay. So, Raby, give me 2 sentences and recap what you just said.
Okay, oh boy, things move so fast. Even I can't keep up sometimes. Of like, sometimes if you explicitly deliver a message, even if it's in Aesop form, it doesn't always stick.
Well, no,
That
of course it's not always going to stick, but that's because everybody's going to interpret something differently, and whether they're correct or not in their interpretation is a totally different story. And the crickets answer me.
Well, of course, it's a totally different story.
Mm-hmm.
Badooch.
All right, so what do you do when you've got situations? Let's say let's talk about Steven Universe for a second.
Oh, boy, here we go.
That's something we're familiar with.
Yeah, because here's the thing. I watched Steven Universe for 74 episodes waiting for it to get good. And I stopped when at the exact moment that the cluster bubbled itself. So that just lost me. At that point I was watching because I could tell that they had written themselves into a corner with this world-ending device that they had put in. That was the cluster. And how are you going to get to the core of the earth, and how are you going to neutralize this whole thing? And then this thing that isn't supposed to have a conscience suddenly has a conscience, and and they convince it to bubble themselves with friendship. It just no part of it made any sense, and it was at that point that it became very clear to me that the writers cared a whole lot more about I'm just gonna flat out say it. They cared a whole lot more about the sexuality of the rest of the cast than they did about actually telling their story. And the rest of the series very much went in that direction, from what I understand, where they were just talking about those sort of relationships. Where they were just talking, and I shouldn't say those sort of relationships. That sounds like it could be misinterpreted as derogatory. I should say where it was just focusing on the dynamics of romantic relationships over the adventure that they started out for the first 75 episodes of the story. Was a total divergence, and it was at that point that I realized, I'll just say it again. They cared more about the sexuality of their characters than they did about telling the story. So I'll open up the floor again. What do you guys think about that? What do we do in that situation?
Having watched the entirety of Steven Universe and the sequel series, Steven Universe Future, we could probably have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I would intend to agree, but of course I'm hesitant to spoil it for you.
I'm not gonna watch it
anyway.
I'm not gonna watch
Ronnie's
it.
never gonna watch it.
I'm never gonna watch it. I know the story. You're not gonna spoil anything. Hit me with your best shot.
Yeah.
And I've seen Future and I've seen the ending of Steven Universe.
Okay.
All right. And the movie.
I've seen the movie.
That was pretty good.
So far, the
I
movie's been
liked
the most I've been entertained by the series.
it.
That is very interesting, though. The fact that those of us who agreed with the message enjoyed the series, and those of us who disagreed with the message didn't enjoy the series.
It's not to say that Steven Universe doesn't have its flaws. It does. It's just whether or not you let it ruin the whole story for you rather than just continuing on to the other good stuff.
So but that was the point I was making there was that wasn't the example of Inside Out where you're weaving the message into the narrative and using the practical examples. It's just totally changing gears and backfisting you with this message of everybody in this show is just in a romantic relationship with each other now.
Yeah. There's more to it than that, though I can see where you're coming from.
You can't do 75 episodes of build-up like that and then change gears like that at the very last second and have it be like that for the rest of it. That's what I'm saying. That's when you care more about your message. And you're doing, and the only way you could make that worse is if Pearl were to just look deadpan into the camera and go drugs are bad, kids.
Yeah.
They did that later with racism.
Yeah, which
that was like in a Cartoon Network. That was in a Cartoon Network bumper.
Yeah, and drugs are bad. But that's not the point here. That's
an interesting point, actually, because think about different drug PSAs and the stories that they tell, and how the message is drugs are bad, but the way that they go about it, you tend to remember the story. It's gee, now I want to try drugs.
That's why a lot of those programs got stopped.
Yeah. They failed very miserably for that very reason. But that just goes back to what I was saying earlier about reverse psychology on people. When you just ham-fist it like that, they either get bored and don't care, or they get into reverse psychology. So that's what I'm talking about there. And when that becomes the case, is no, it should not overtake the story. I could even call it the some people have been referring to it as the Netflix adaptation syndrome, where you don't really have any characters. Everybody's just there to hit the diversity checkbox, right? Which is fine. I have no problem with diverse characters, but you can very clearly tell as an artist, as a storyteller, when it's just there to meet a quota, to pander and to bait to whatever niche audiences are out there, and when it's there because like the author just genuinely he made the story, or he or she, it doesn't matter. When they made the story, they envisioned these characters. This is what they looked like. This is what they acted like. And this is why they're together, and this is what they're trying to go, and you actually go for that story, and whatever lessons that are in that will just appear, right? They will come forth naturally, because life is conflict, and life is learning, and there's things, and that is the human experience. But when you force it, like Steven Universe did, that's when you start having these problems, and that's when it becomes very obvious that you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, because you think you're woke, or you get, or for whatever reason you feel like you have to pander to the woke crowd and meet the affirmative action standards. Okay, so that's my rant. Somebody hit me with a chair. Okay, I feel like I've been rambling for too long with no consequences here. What's going on?
Yeah,
you gotta leave some room to say something.
Well, what I find interesting, I do see your point that sometimes it becomes so explicit that it does break the fourth wall, and you forget that you're witnessing a story. Though the question that begs the question of where is the line? Like, a good example of where I think there is a general debate over whether it crosses the line or not is Zootopia. Is everyone familiar with that film?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay. Okay. I am.
Yeah. The film is very clearly an allegory for racism.
But what's good about it is that the predators and prey can be stand-ins for, like, pretty much a lot of different things that divide people.
Okay.
Like, it's not really clear about what it's supposed to stand in for.
And
like,
it's
you can
not even
interpret
just
it
predators and prey.
Right.
Like, in Zootopia, you could almost divide it into two halves.
There's the big animals and the small animals, too.
Exactly. The first half is about a small animal trying to overcome prejudice from big animals, and then the second half is about the predator trying to overcome prejudice from prey.
Yeah, like, that's what's interesting. So, like, would you call that intersectional?
Intersectional
Where,
what?
like,
I don't think I would call it intersectional exactly, because the main protagonist only belongs to one of the disadvantaged groups.
right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, she's a small animal and she's a prey, which are, like, the prey, as seen in Zootopia, make up a larger population in the story.
And they are not the target of the villain in that story. So she is in the advantaged group in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, she's small, which, like, gives some disadvantage, but she's, like, she just has to overcome that.
Yeah. SJW terms aside, the pivot between half one and half two is the protagonist spends all of the first half overcoming the prejudice against her, and then immediately puts on full display the prejudice she holds against predators right in front of the male lead, who happens to be a predator. And that prejudice is basically thrown in her face.
And then distributed through the media.
Right. So what that tells me is that it's not that the half of this movie is about this, and then half of this movie flips the script. To me, that just says the whole script means that prejudices can happen to anybody, and everybody is going to right, and it can be used as a tool for people who watch it and take it seriously. It can be used as a tool to identify where they might have similar parallels in their own lives. Because
I think it was used to, like, say, like, first the movie is about one thing and then it's about another thing. It's two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And, you can use that. So, for example, there's certainly groups out there that I've never had any good interactions with. But it doesn't matter, right? If you you just think of a group in your head and you poll everybody in the planet on that, that falls into that demographic and you find that 95% of them come back with this horrible worldview that you just hate. Then it doesn't matter. It still doesn't matter, right? All of your suspicions about the predators have been confirmed. What do you do now when you meet a predator? I still think, even in that situation, that as far as I can tell, this person is still in the 5%, right? This person is this person is not this individual, right? I know what the group is like, but that doesn't say anything for the individual in any circumstance.
Yeah.
So that's what I happen to believe in my life, and that's sort of, and if I were to try to deliver that message, I might be able to use Zootopia as a device to sort of drive that message in a way that might make it more digestible to somebody who hasn't sat down and meditated about it for years on end, right? To
like looks like we have another person in here.
Yeah, now Cordero decides to join us 45 minutes late. What the heck, man?
I got back from the store and did not realize what time it was. Holy crap, today just disappeared.
I can understand that. Don't do it again.
My bad.
It's a serious show. We did serious business talking about ponies.
Yes. I understand. I automatically concede tonight. I automatically lose no matter what I say.
Well, we don't win and lose debates here.
We learn from them, so I guess we'll say.
Yeah. So okay, so Cordero, let me just give you the quick rundown here in case I'm pretty sure you've met Bright Idea before, but Bright Idea's also got her boyfriend, Mr. Raby, with us tonight. Say hi, Raby.
Hi, Raby.
No.
Sound like you, man.
Okay, so before we get into the audience participation segment here, first of all, Raby, Bright, DJ, what do you think about what I just said in terms of using Zootopia to as that tool?
I think it's a very good idea, and I bet you classrooms have shown this movie, or like people have seen this movie with their families and say, okay, let's have a conversation about unconscious bias, or let's have a conversation about prejudice, and not judging somebody just because they're in a particular group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like you really hit the nail on the head of you can use a story as a tool to deliver a message, and yeah, you need to be careful about not breaking the fourth wall, but as long as you are able to maintain immersion, so long as you're able to maintain the suspension of disbelief that is inherent in narrative, then you will get that message across, whatever that message may be.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like that's a new concept either, because I just remembered an example from the 1990s. Has everybody here seen the X-Men cartoon that ran back then?
Yes.
With it, yeah.
I saw a little of it.
Okay, well, there was an episode.
No.
Okay, well, there was a... yeah. Get out of here, DJ, you freaking zoomer.
Evolution was better.
Get some cut. Okay, now you're banned.
Double get out of here. Double get out of here harder.
No.
Get out of here harder?
Yes.
You feeling lucky, bub?
Yeah. So no, there was an episode where they went back in time. Okay, which is a red flag in and of itself, but they went back in time. They're like, we got to keep a low profile so we don't mess with the time stream or whatever. And they for whatever reason, in order to accomplish what they need to do, they were looking for somebody in a particular restaurant, and they walked in there and said, and immediately the owner of the restaurant went, "We don't serve your kind here." And I'm like, shoot, how did he know they were mutants at the age of 13 when I saw that? And I'm like, and I went, shoot, how did they know they were mutants? And then Storm just straight up said, "Oh, this guy's being racist," because they were in like the late 1940s or early 1950s, something like that, when segregation was still a thing. And yes. And that is, that sort of reminds the audience that when X-Men was written, it was about racism, and that's not even any kind of interpretation. That's straight from Stanley's mouth. You know? So you can use that. I was saying that's not, when we talk about putting these messages into the story, that's not a new thing. They've been doing it like that. And if anything, back in the day, when the X-Men 90, the cartoon did it way better than anybody else is doing it these days, because they just showed that it happened and showed that, these people were not wise for believing these things and acting this way and having these prejudices. They just showed it. They didn't ham-fist it. They didn't tell it. They didn't just change the race and sexuality of every already pre-established character just to hit those diversity points.
They just showed the events of the story and how it affected the characters. That's how you do it.
And that didn't. And but there's people out there that say that that type of thing is harmful because it shows racism. Well, you have to show racism, or you have to show insert
like,
whatever
it all depends
here.
on the context. The antagonists are showing this. It doesn't mean that it's promoting it or condoning it.
Yeah, my Exhibit A perhaps would be Huckleberry Finn, where it shows slavery, but also delivers a message that slavery is bad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly the point, is that in order to tell a story, you have to have conflict. There is no story without the conflict. And if you just try to ignore everything in history that ever happened that was wrong, you're not going to have any sort of life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and when we get these people these days that are like, this is why they say these things and they say, oh, because it depicted, let's say, a Nazi, right? A Nazi German from World War II.
Were they the good guy? Were they the good guy, or were they the bad guy?
It's the fact that they're in there at all, right? Hey,
you're talking to a couple of Jews here.
If you watch The Man in the High Tower, that gets pretty blurry on if any Nazis are good guys.
Yeah, so
you can fix it by playing Wolfenstein.
Well, no, that's not the point here. I'm saying there's people that say if you depict, even in a historical context, any depiction, well, it's like then you're gonna just erase the history and erase what happened.
That's just as bad.
That's worse.
Yeah,
I would say it's worse. Okay, so Cordero, why don't you? I know you had some thoughts on this sort of topic that you were looking forward to sharing with us tonight. So why don't you give us what you wanted to say? We'll talk about that for a few minutes before we get into the audience participation segment.
Yeah, I guess I'll just summarize what my impression of the question was. Should message overtake story? Now, the way it's written implies that message has been overtaking story a lot lately in media, and I agree. It's happening all of the time. And the way it's worded, should message overtake story? Absolutely not. Never in any circumstances. But that isn't to say that stories, and I think you guys covered this, shouldn't have messages or don't. They're almost always going to have messages, whether you want them to have one or not. And if you want to present any kind of message in your story, if you don't have a good story to begin with, you have nothing. You have a PSA announcement with characters if you don't have a good story. So like message should absolutely never overtake story because you literally don't have a story when that happens. And my example that I was going to bring up was the movie The Predator from the 80s. Who remembers Predator from the 80s?
Now
I know about it, but
you're
I know about it.
You're missing out, Brian. Go watch that movie.
Dylan, you son
that
of
had
a
Arnold
bitch.
Schwarzenegger, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it did. It's the you
Okay.
son of a bitch and
Get to the
Schwarzenegger-
chopper.
Get to DJ. Yes, that's in there. And the meme with the muscly arms grabbing each
Oh,
other.
that's
Dylan,
where
you
it's
son of a
from?
bitch. That's where that's from. That's from The Predator.
Oh, okay.
Now the Predator on its face, and when you watch it, it's just an 80s schlocky, really fun, exciting action movie. There does not seem to be any overt message in it, and I really, really doubt the creators of The Predator had like a big message that they wanted to get out there. But when you watch a movie like The Predator, whether you want a message or not, because Predator is well made and artfully constructed as a movie with good characters and story, you can pull messages and greater meaning out of the Predator. Like you have these military guys, these paid military guys whose job is to go in and kill people. Usually it's to save people, but their job is to go in and kill people. And so like you can pull out military industrial complex stuff out of this. The government is bad. America is bad. Imperialism, colonialism, all of that.
Mhm.
These guys are going in ostensibly as the heroes, but they find out in the middle of their mission. By the way, the monster hasn't shown up yet. In the middle of their mission, they find out that the bad guys aren't as bad as, I'm oversimplifying this, the bad guys aren't as bad as they thought. They were lied to by HQ and basically sent in there to just kill a bunch of people that were in America's way. And while they're doing this, they're realizing that they've been used. And so as they're trying to finish their mission and get out, they're trying to cut through the forest to get to the chopper so that they can be lifted out of the scenario. And that's when they run into the monster, and it kills every single last one of them except Arnold Schwarzenegger. Spoilers, sorry, I ruined the 30-year-old movie for you.
Yeah.
So like you have these top of the line military guys who just go in and they just slaughter all of these other military guys. Like they just destroy them. They're clearly the best of the best. But when they run into the Predator, they are out of their element, and you get that horror, that fear, because we've established how competent these guys are and how badass they are, and they are helpless against the Predator despite making all of these good tactical decisions and taking all these precautions. The Predator still slips in and is killing them one by one, and there's nothing that they can do about it. So even from that, you can draw, look at that, even with all of this might and all of this ability that they have, in the end, it's absolutely meaningless. So you can pull like an existential crisis out of this. What's the meaning of anything? War is bad, war is pointless. Even if you're good at war, all that comes out of it is death. And also the Predator's motivation for hunting them is just that. He's a predator. He's hunting them for sport. So then you take that and you juxtapose that against American military, which thinks of itself as the good guys. You see what I'm getting at here? You can pull hundreds of messages out of the Predator. And the purpose of the Predator was to make a cool action movie that made money. And boy, did they succeed in doing that. But literally, because they made a great story, there's no getting around good messages coming out of art. So whether it's out of accident, or you're trying to make a really good message, when you're constructing a story, the story has to come first. You have to have a great story, or else you have nothing, and your message falls flat.
Now, Cordero, let me ask you this question. Let me prove my point here by asking you this question. This is the point I've been making the whole night. How much of the quality would Predator have retained if at any point in time they had said, they said this guy this monster is hunting us just like we were hunting those people. Now the shoes. How much of the quality would have been retained by that movie if they had explicitly said what you just said at any point?
Bargain bin, 0 out of 10, $1.99 on discount. Nobody. No, I'm kidding. It would suffer. The quality would suffer by doing it on the nose like that. They did nothing of the sort, and you could still you come out of the Predator and you're probably thinking, war is probably not a good idea. War is no better than hunting for sport. You come out of the movie thinking that, whether you meant to or not. War is basically no better than hunting for sport. We're no better than the Predator.
Right.
But you had a great time doing it.
Interesting. Like also given the action and the effects, that probably added a lot to it too.
Oh yeah, the effects were groundbreaking and largely practical, with a little bit of green screen.
Yeah,
as
though
they were a lot of
admittedly
it.
you said very very poignantly what I was trying to say early in the debate.
Oh, and what was that?
That you can deliver a message through a compelling story even without meaning to.
Right, but
Correct.
let me catch you up here, Cordero. What he had said at the beginning was he was referring to a game called Call of Juarez, where scenarios in that game depicted human trafficking by the Mexicans and therefore reinforced bad stereotypes that and by and large harmful. I'm massively paraphrasing him. Raby, am I being inaccurate in what you said?
No, you're hitting it pretty spot on.
Right. So what do you think about that, Cordero? And I basically said, well, that, um, I said, how does that hurt anybody if it actually happens?
This movie was harmful because of how it was depicting cartels and
Yes.
such.
Video game.
Video game. I tend to agree with Brony on this one. Like, if you're depicting something that happens, and especially if you're in a fictional universe and you're trying to create like an action story, like if you play a video game or watch a story that involves like cartels that either are using or are similar to like Latin American cartels and drug countries, and you come out of that movie thinking, wow, Latin American people sure are bad and full of drug industry garbage. I think less of them now. That's kind of your fault and not the point anyone was making. And I really don't think art should be responsible for people pulling bad things like that out of media. And I really, really doubt the game was trying to get to that. The game was probably trying to use cartels to tell a compelling story because it's easy to do so. It's free fodder. Cartels are basically government militaries. Based on a very lucrative market of drugs, and you can tell a really great story and have compelling messages that come out of that. So if people were, oh, it's harmful because somebody might watch that and think, well, now I think less of Colombian people and their stupid drugs. That person's dumb, and you really can't ask creators to account for that. And people are doing that lately. They're asking creators to account for the worst viewer who might pull something negative out of something, and they're saying that, well, the stereotype itself is harmful. No, we're curtailing to we are trying to prevent stupid people from hurting themselves and others.
Yeah, we should teach critical thinking in school. That should really, like, rather than multiple choice, have critical thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I think I'm with Brony on this one. Like, that should not be a real problem.
And that's another example of when message overtakes a story in a bad way, is when you feel like you have to censor yourself like that. Censorship doesn't do anybody any good.
That's a huge thing to tackle. Probably the end of the debate isn't a good time to go into it.
Yeah, I mean, it just reminds me of all the arguments over the Feeling Pinky Keen episode, how that's probably a more widely known example of someone of a bunch of people drawing a message out of a story that was not intended and was considered problematic by the masses, and the artists just kind of clamming up as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Well, whoever the writer was, and I think Faust as well, came out and said, no, that was not meant to be religious. It was just meant to kind of convey the idea that you don't know everything. Right, and that you probably can't know everything. It's just which doesn't have to, which yes is common in religious circles, and all five of us in this call know that. But that doesn't mean that's what they had intended. Because I watched it, I watched that episode being Christian, and so did DJ. And Cordero has read the Bible and watched that episode, and you two are Jewish, and we're all pretty much reading the same book here, and watched that episode and said, nah, that's not religious.
Yeah.
But,
there's a large divide from maybe there's stuff out there that we don't know, and one specific belief in a deity, or like that's a pretty large gap to jump.
And then r/atheism just blew their fedoras right off their heads.
I mean, I could as easily argue that it's an agnostic message
Yeah.
more than it's a specific religious message. Like that's an easier jump to make.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's get on to audience participation here. So a whole lot of familiar faces in the chat tonight, so I don't really need to explain how this works here. But let's take a look at some of the chat here. Real quick question. Yeah, real quick question. So my guess for tonight, have you seen any chat that you want to see? I've got a few listed down here, and we'll get through those real quick. But
0 out of 10, too preachy.
All right,
I
let's
have
see.
2.
Okay. Paladin Pony T says, what messages in stories would you say are the most important? Bright, why don't you start us off with that question?
Which messages are the most important? Those that help you be a better, more compassionate, and practical person. Like stuff that helps you get on in life. Nothing that I guess gives you nothing that gives you an inaccurate view of how life works.
Raby, what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking something pretty similar to Bright. I would just reword it as something that gives you a better view of life, or more accurate, because you're never going to be completely right about everything, but something that, as you said earlier today, makes you think and makes you question something that you previously held, and
stuff that makes you assume less.
Mm-hmm. DJ, what do you think?
Could you restate the question, please? I think I missed something.
What messages and stories would you say are the most important?
Most important? I'm usually of a practical mindset, so I usually lean towards ones that are kind of more useful on a day-to-day basis. But I really like ones that kind of teach relationship issues, because every relationship is different, so it's good to make sure you have a lot to draw off of. I got a lot of that out of Tangled, especially.
Oh, Tangled was awesome.
The series, I mean, not
yes,
the movie.
I know. The series is as awesome as the film. Maybe more so.
I haven't
Definitely
seen it.
more so.
Well, I didn't like
need to catch up on that.
Yeah.
Well,
and I'm sure you'll relish doing so.
I'll watch the. Well, no, I was actually about to say that I didn't like Tangled, and then I played the movie over again in my head, and I'm like, actually, it wasn't really bad. I'm just being a curmudgeon. Yeah, I guess I'll have to check out the series then. And Cordero, what do you think?
I think the best messages in movies are very similar to a lot of the best CGIs in movies. If it's invisible, the more invisible it is to you, the less you can tell it's there. The better it's doing its job and the better it is. Like, I think the best messages in media are when you leave the movie theater. If you leave the movie theater thinking, boy, I sure did learn something, you probably didn't have a lot of fun. Like, if you know that you've been given a message or if you know you've been preached to, you likely didn't have a good time, even if you're trying to convince yourself you did because you like the message or whatever. The best messages are the one where you leave the theater going, did you see the thing and where they flipped the car and then he said the line and you don't even realize that you've learned something. You know, maybe somewhere in the back of your head, you're like, maybe I should be more open-minded about stuff like that. Yeah. But you don't even realize that it's happening to you. Those are the best messages.
Okay, so don't watch anything by Christopher Nolan.
The movie plot, the movie message we deserve, not the movie message we need.
Shut up, Alfred.
Okay, I think
what do you think are the most important messages?
I think the most important messages are the ones that agree with my very narrow worldview.
So you like the racist messages?
Oh no.
That only if they're racist against the reptilians.
Oh yeah. You have very specified racism.
Yes,
and very good at some episodes of Doctor Who.
And you know something, I really just, you know, anything that propagates hatred against the Sangheili. I hate those guys so much.
I don't even know what that is.
Those are the elites from Halo.
Oh.
Yep.
I didn't know their names other than elites. I remember killing a lot of them.
Yeah, and
then playing as them.
Yes.
Yeah, that was that's an example we could have used at some point in time here. Was Halo was just about the first Halo. All you did was like those are the aliens. The aliens are bad because
Murder everything.
Yeah, just kill everything. And then the second Halo, it's like, oh shoot, it's just religious propaganda, and it's not even their fault. That's how you do it right.
Yes, make a wisdom save to determine if you become a murder hobo.
D&D stuff.
I don't think I've ever heard Master Chief called a murder hobo.
Have you ever seen his house? He's killed a lot of people.
He's had a few ships. That could count as a house in those universes.
It's like a glorified bus.
Okay, so Doughboy123X says, I've been thinking about this some. Does story have to have a central theme to work?
That was one that I took down, and I liked that question.
Yeah, so go for it, Bright. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to give you 3 words. Winnie the Pooh. What is the central theme in their stories? Like, basically a lot of the stories I as far as I can see, are just, like, slice of life adventures. The central theme, I don't really see one, except if it's perhaps treasure your childhood, or
The central theme is Christopher Robin's sanity. He's actually trapped in a coma, and all of the characters represents the parts of his psyche, and he's using those characters to keep from losing his mind and slipping.
No, you're wrong. You're completely wrong. It's all propaganda for the honey industry.
No,
Clearly,
you're both wrong.
Honey.
You're both wrong. Each of those characters represents a different mental illness and or drug addiction.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a
How do you
whole
think
lot
he got
of
into the coma?
unintentional themes.
Next, we're gonna get into Ed, Ed and Eddie with Purgatory.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that stuff.
That I've heard.
I've heard that.
So yeah, a story doesn't have to have a central theme to work. It does need to have some kind of conflict. Not that there's really much in the way of bad guys in Winnie the Pooh, but there's just like a bunch of different conflict, like Pooh's stuck in a hole because he ate too much honey. Oh no. Or Tigger's bouncing too much, which bugs the heck out of Rabbit. So
Or
like,
worries about a thunderstorm.
Yeah. So like there's conflict, there's story there, but like central theming might be listening to each other or caring for each other or something like that. Actually that might be the central theme.
Yeah. If I may take the mic on this, central theme isn't required, but it's highly recommended because it will make the difference between external conflict and internal conflict.
Mm.
And I just find internal conflict to be much more interesting.
It doesn't. I don't think something needs to have a central theme in order to work, but I think it works a lot better with a central theme, because going back to the parallels I made to parables earlier, I like to know exactly what you're trying to tell me so that I can then assess it practically, rather than sit here and try to figure out everything that you meant. And if you put layers on it, that's fine. There were a lot of, let's take the Crystal Empire for example. That's my favorite episode in the whole series still. Layers on layers on layers in that, with Sombra, with the theme of the Crystal Empire, and it could also just be taken literally. And the deeper you get, but they still gave that central theme of selflessness, of camaraderie and community, and banding together to solve whatever problems come your way. They gave me something that I can then assess concrete and said, okay, this is what you're telling me. How accurate is it to real life? And how can I apply this message? If you just, here's, Doug Walker did a really good demonstration of this concept at one time, is when you try to fake that depth of you can weave it into the narrative subtly, you can put the layers on it, or you can just look super serious into the camera and go banana.
Yeah.
just the inflection of my voice is meant to imply depth in poetry, but I'm just saying banana.
Yeah.
Or am I just saying banana?
It's like you're saying a lot, but are you really saying anything?
Right. And a couple of weeks ago, Cordero made the same exact point about the song that's just the song that's just 4 minutes and 32 seconds of silence. But
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he went on a rant. But
John Cage's 434.
Yeah. So that's why I think you need it. Like you don't necessarily need it, but it works better.
Yeah.
Okay, your car doesn't necessarily need to have fully inflated tires, but it works a lot better if it does.
Yeah.
Let's move on here. The Soldier of Equestria says, personally, I prefer story to get something across, but for something quick and last minute, I would prefer a message. So, this guy either wants The Lord of the Rings in terms of depth and themes and things like that, or he wants a PSA and nothing in between. What do we think about that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so like for like shorter stories, like you want just a message, like how? Yeah, that would basically be a PSA. Like how would that work? You're not even getting a story. Like just go read the Bible. Like if you just want a message, just read just watch children's content, I guess, because that's very message forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Yeah. If you don't have time for a big deep story, go for like a cheap message. It's like
even shorts and short stories. Yeah, even shorts and short stories, they're not necessarily like upfront with a message. Like the message alone it doesn't mean it's a quick story. Like I established before, message alone or message forward is nothing. Like if you're like, oh, let me just do something quick, I'll just get a message real quick, then that's nothing. You don't have a story. I'm broken.
I mean,
I'm broken now.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with like Bryan and I watching Infinity Train, how you can tell a story in 11 minutes.
Yeah. Like the episodes are 11 minutes anyway.
I don't have time for a Marvel movie. Can I just get a clip of Captain America telling me how to live my life?
Yeah. Like,
so you need.
Oh, you're a fugitive from the law.
Yeah. I still gotta show him the Captain America and all the MCU. He's only seen Iron Man so far.
But Captain America.
So long as you skip Captain Marvel.
We literally had Captain America delivering PSAs in that Spider-Man movie. Just kind of sits down backwards on the stool and just starts saying stuff. The movie ended with Captain America just sitting down and he goes, "So you want to know about sex?" And then it just cuts. And all right.
Yeah.
Snowflakeson with a random H in there for some reason. Says Gravity Falls, Dipper versus Manliness, and Friendship is Magic's Dragon Quest are basically the same exact plot. But MLP spoke in metaphor, while Gravity Falls was direct. Do you think it's better for kids shows to disguise? And then he said part 1, so I'm looking for part 2 here. But okay, so I think we can get a sense of what part 2 was here. Is it better to work through metaphor or is it better to be direct? Now, those are both,
I've seen both.
Yeah, those are both good examples of when you can be overt versus when you can be subtle. So that's an interesting example to give there.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think that is, especially when you're dealing with children's content, you probably do need to speak in metaphor a little more, because children don't often understand abstract concepts. They can understand concrete narratives, but abstract concepts are a little much for them. And I have science to back me up on that. So speaking in metaphor in children's content is usually better.
Having seen both Gravity Falls and My Little Pony, I I think the matter comes down to personal preference and what you look for. Are you looking for like more straight, direct, or are you looking for something kind of satirical or kind of lampshading what you're trying to say? Like My Little Pony and Gravity Falls are two different flavors for the same message. So, what flavor do you like better?
Mm.
Gravity Falls is a very character driven show. So an interesting thing with being direct versus being metaphorical is the My Little Pony episode of Dragon Quest. While it was being metaphorical, it was very thinly veiled. Like you're very aware, unless you're 6 years old, you're very aware of the message that they're trying to present to you, even though they're not directly stating it. So while it does do metaphor, it's also a very thinly veiled metaphor, but it works because My Little Pony's target demographic, and they usually give you a fun ride while you're there. Again, message does not overtake story, despite being obvious. And then Gravity Falls, even though the Dipper example may have been more direct, Gravity Falls is so character driven. It had a lot of clout built up at the story of that time to give you that more direct message. And also that message was given through the lens of Dipper. Like they weren't turning to the camera to the audience and saying, here's how you should be, what you should learn. That was based on, this is what Dipper needs to learn. Like it was done through the lens of Dipper, and it had built up characters over time so well. They had built up the credibility to do that with one of their characters, to make them directly learn something. So even though the My Little Pony is more metaphorical, it's so thinly veiled. It's actually it's more obvious than the direct way that they did it with Gravity Falls. Even though Gravity Falls is more upfront about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
And even then, that episode of Gravity Falls, it wasn't thinly veiled all the way through, because throughout most of the episode, Dipper and the Manitars were chill. There was no roughhousing, really. Sure, there were challenges, but they were getting along. They liked each other. Yeah. And it showed that they were still on decently friendly terms by the end of the series. Mm-hmm. Garble and Spike never made up.
No.
That's
always going to be a bad relationship.
Yeah.
And if anything, that was worse because towards the end of the series there, it just turned out that Garble was just in the closet the whole time.
Yeah.
Which is also a bad message, in my opinion.
Was he trapped in the closet?
No, he was
His bongos were.
No, he was.
Did he sing a 9-minute pop song about how he couldn't get out of the closet?
No, he was a beatnik, which is he was a hipster, which is even worse.
He was a French one.
He did slam poetry.
Yeah.
He did slam poetry, and I wanted to slam him with a crowbar. Which just tells you that everybody that acts a certain way is really just hiding, nothing is ever as it seems. And I'm like, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward. In fact, usually it's pretty straightforward. At least that's been my experience.
And even still with Gravity Falls, the message isn't stated until Dipper needs to be reassured that he made the right decision in the end. He did it without being told to. He made the choice to go his own way, to be his own man, which is what it was about. And Grunkle Stan just reaffirmed it in him to make him understand that, yes, what he did was correct. Because he was doubting himself, because that's what happens when you have peer pressure.
Right.
Leaving the agency there in the character is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have swore that Dragon Quest was a lot more about nature versus nurture, and whether or not you choose to believe that because you come from somewhere that you have to act a certain way. That's like me saying, because I'm from New York, I have to talk with an accent and be super aggressive with everybody all the time.
Hey, he's walking here.
Shut up, DJ. Nobody asked you anything. I swear I'm going to take your kneecaps right out.
I would say a more obvious metaphor in MLP is Tanks for the Memories. Like, that one, I think I said it at the time, it goes through the textbook stages of grief. And even though it doesn't say this episode is about mourning a death, it just says, oh, he's hibernating for the winter. Pretty much anybody familiar with the 5 stages of grief knows it's about death.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one where I went around and I was the only voice in the community that said this is not about death. This is about how to handle grief and just parting ways with anybody in general. And then everybody and then even the writers and the show producers came out and said, no, this is about death. And I'm like, well, you didn't do it. At that point I was thinking, because you didn't do a very good job if that's what you were trying to do. If you want to talk about death, kill a character. That's what if you want to, but
Granny Smith.
But a hibernation is temporary. So I'm watching it going, okay, so how do we apply this to real life? A friend going off to a different college, somebody joining the military, somebody getting married, just friends growing in different directions for one way or another. Yeah. And and you not being able to move on with your own life because of that. And then everybody comes, the show creators come out and say, no, it's about death. Then kill the tortoise.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I 100% agree. Like that might be one episode.
Have somebody have like an elderly relative who passes, and like we may not get to meet that character, but it mean a lot to whoever's dealing with it. So
either that, or just if you want to make it.
They literally made that episode a couple seasons later with Applejack's appearance. They literally made that episode, but did it correctly with characters that were already kind of established as dead, and without ever having to bring up the fact that they were dead, but they were clearly dealing with death the whole time. They finally nutted up and pulled the trigger a couple seasons later, but Thanks for the Memories is so annoying for all the reasons that Brony listed. It's so middle of the road and half-assed. It either do a different message or kill a character. It's so weird and uncomfortable because you are watching Ashley Ball's performance on Rainbow Dash, who's doing a great job of grieving over an actually dead pet. I was uncomfortable with how relatable, like, I believe that Tank is dead on this performance. Like, this is working, but because Tank is hibernating, it's like, well, now it's weird and it's really uncomfortable because Ashley Ball and Rainbow Dash's lines and delivery went all the way to death, went all the way there and didn't pull back. But the story did. The story did pull back and went halfway, and it made it so weird and uncomfortable. I can imagine a 6-year-old going, "This is weird. The tortoise is not dead." Like, it's oh my gosh, I'm double broken.
I think that's just a limitation of the two shows. Is that MLP probably was a lot. MLP probably had a lot.
2 seasons later, they did it right.
It's a self-imposed limitation too. Nobody ever said that you can't talk about death in a kid's show, or at least if they did,
I would think Hasbro would.
Then Hasbro was wrong. And here's the one thing that I will definitely, because I think Friendship is Magic is perfect, but here's the one thing where that might be wrong, is that they were horrible at tackling Circle of Life. We could have done with belly bump cadence. We could have done with an explanation of why the Cake Twins are the way they are. We could have done, we definitely needed to know more about the parents and what happened to them. And then there's Where the Apple Lies, right? Where there's no apple bloom, but there's also no Bright Mac and no pear butter. So, and we're exclusively with Applejack and Big Mac are exclusively with Granny Smith. So where the heck Bright Mac and Pear Butter? Why are they never mentioned? But where's Apple Bloom? Because you can't have Apple Bloom without Bright Mac and Pear Butter. Ponies do not grow on apple trees. Lauren Fawcett specifically said in a DeviantArt post they are mammals and they reproduce as such.
Well, I think you could probably fix that with a single line, honestly.
But it wasn't there, so they screwed it up.
It wasn't there, but yeah, it's like you could fix that with a single line of AJ and Big Mac arguing and just Granny Smith going, "Shh, you'll wake the baby."
Yeah.
Yeah, taken care of.
Yeah, that's or a single line of when your parents hear about this, it's gonna be you're gonna be in for such a grounding, you know.
Yeah, you're gonna get it.
Yeah, exactly.
When they get back from their delivery to Manhattan of the apples, you're gonna hear it from your parents.
Yeah.
Fixed.
Stuff like that.
That's all they needed to do. But they were so horrible at tackling Circle of Life. I mean, shoot, Wonderbolt Academy. Rainbow Dash saves everybody from plummeting to their death, which she's done before. She did it in Suited for Success, and they've used the K word before and the D word before. But for some reason now in season 3, she's like, my friends could have been smashed to pieces.
Yeah. If your parents didn't just fall into a Timberwolf pit last week, you would be so grounded right now.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, great.
That would not go over well.
No.
In any sense.
Oh, jeez. Doughboy says Dragon Quest still has the unfortunate problem of coming off as masculinity is bad. I don't think it has that message, because nobody ever said in that episode, if you're a man, you will act this way. It's not about, no, if you're a dragon, you act this way. If you're a New Yorker, you're going to be aggressive and have an accent. Yeah. If you're from Louisiana, you cook everything with too much Cajun spices. You know.
I think
Also,
you might draw that message is because most of the dragons, like all the dragons in that episode, were male. There weren't any female dragons in that episode.
Yeah.
And like ponies, for the most part, like that are portrayed, it seems, are female. And so that's where that message might come from. And then it got fixed with episodes like the what do you call it?
Literally anything with Ember, the most masculine dragon of them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now we've got that. But now we've got the same problem as feeling Pinky Keen.
Mm. Yeah,
that's
like
the same exact problem as feeling
message.
Pinky Keen. Right.
Oh, you're drawing a message out of there that wasn't intended or
yes,
put in there?
Exactly.
True.
Yeah, if you'd had female dragons in the background doing the same things that the male dragons were doing, then you might not have gotten that message. But the fact that the background artists or animators didn't include female dragons in there kind of like told that message for them without them intending.
Rusty Helm says. Rusty Helm says.
I'm still worrying about Craggle.
Yeah, Rusty Helm says, Brony, I mean, we do use a lot of spice. So he's from Louisiana, apparently. Yeah, remember, kids, it's not racist if it's true.
Well, he also called you out earlier. Says, I mean, Brony does have an accent and is aggressive.
Yeah.
Well, I was hamming it up for the purpose of the meme there, but yeah.
I was going to say, Death of the Author has gotten so bad, it's more like the author never existed at this point. Does everyone know what Death of the Author is?
We talked about that.
Yeah, we covered it earlier.
Yeah. It's so, the artist never existed to begin with at this point. It's just everything that exists, you pull out whatever you want out of it, and whatever most people think it is, that's what it is now, and you can't argue against it. And if they decide to pull out the worst thing imaginable and decide that was the author's intent, then the author gets punished for that intent. So it's Death of the Author, unless the author did something wrong, in which case then that was absolutely the author's intent, and they need to be canceled for it.
Right. So that was what I was saying earlier but I used the parables as a example here, because the parables can only mean one thing. I mean, if they don't just mean one thing, then they can mean anything. And when they mean anything, they mean nothing. So, Dragon Quest can be about masculinity as long as it can, but they never specifically said masculinity in there. So you could, if you're a man, you will act like this. If you're a dragon, you will act like this. If you're from New York, you will act like this. If you're from California, you will smoke weed and have horrible political views. If you're black, you're in a gang. You could apply it to literally anything.
Also, follow-up matters. Context and follow-up matters, because if it's like, are they going to a toxic masculinity thing here based on that episode? But then in later episodes, they don't revisit the men are bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't follow that up with more continuity that implies that masculine behavior is bad. They keep it where the episode kept it, and then they even show other dragons like Ember, who's totally has masculine behaviors. So the context of the show after that shows, okay, no, they didn't go there because look at the rest of the work. it doesn't stick with that. So therefore, you pulling that out of that's from your brain, not from the show.
And well,
it actually sounds more like a toxic masculinity thing when you put it like that, because Ember was demonstrating there's more than one way to be a dragon, and the actual definition of toxic masculinity is the assumption that there's only one way to be a man, when there isn't.
Yeah.
But that's a debate for another time.
Yeah, I would.
Well, maybe they blunted the blow by making Ember female and doing that same message, so that it like, hey, we don't want to make guys feel bad, but we do. You know what I'm saying? Like it kind of softens the blow.
I understand what you're saying. The question I always ask when this comes up is what defines masculine and feminine behavior. Like, for example, we
beef.
It's what's for dinner.
Well, women certainly have beef.
No, they don't.
You know what I meant.
Hey, beef. I'm vegetarian.
Right. So yes, there are. I'll give you this. There are certain behaviors and mentalities that across cultures and across history, seem to that we, in our experience across cultures and across history, we see men exhibit more than women, and there probably are psychological, biological, psychological reasonings for that are totally valid. But so in our experience, we see men exhibit them more, but I've also seen women exhibit some of these traits as well. So let's take, harp on Dragon Quest a little bit more here. Let's say some of those behaviors, or Gauntlet of Fire, right? So
that's the episode title. I was trying to think of that.
Yeah, Gauntlet of Fire with Ember. Why is Ember acting like a man? Because she's trying to ascend to the throne, or why is she acting like a man? Because she's trying to do what is right for her family, for her people, the dragons, right? There's a lot less. I see a lot less of being a good mother or being a good father, and a lot more, like, the more I think about what makes a good mother and what makes a good father, the more it just kind of congeals into what makes a good parent. What the things that make a good man and the things that make a good woman often, in my eyes, congeal and become more so what makes a good person. And yes, there are differences, but they're only there on a biological level, and sometimes a cosmetic level, and not nearly as much of a practical level.
Look, being a dick is not cool no matter what gender you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you and everybody in here, probably, if you sat down and thought about it, knows an equal amount of psychopaths and sociopaths that are both male and female. And if you thought about it even more, you might find at least one from every culture and what you might even describe as race.
Oh, yeah.
The most masculine woman I can think of is Amanda Nunes.
She
is really good at messing people up.
No idea who that is.
I always find a way to bring up MMA. Like it's my special talent.
Is that one of those?
I will find a way to bring up MMA.
Is that one of those Is that one of those fighters that just decided one day they were going to identify as female and entered the women's league?
Amanda Nunes? No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. She's just that good.
All right. Cool. Yeah, because that's what I thought you were talking about for a second there, and I was like, yeah, never mind.
Okay, well, before we go into that, we open that can of worms, perhaps we should go to the next audience question.
Yeah, sure. So who's got an audience question that they wanna tackle?
I have one of, what is your opinion on My Little Pony removing the moral at the end of episode after season 5? And I didn't take down who asked that question. I just liked the question.
Okay. So what do you think?
I thought it was really interesting, like, that they did away with writing to Princess Celestia and just flat out stating the moral. Although they did find ways to flat out state the moral. But I don't think My Little Pony ever lost the ability to weave a message into the story in a good way. They might have tried too hard to come up with new stories in later seasons and probably retreading old ground, but for a lot of episodes, I felt like they were able to tell a good story and deliver good messages along the way.
Yeah. My opinion on why the Aesop kind of backed off in season 5 is because season 5 was much more adult geared than child geared.
Right? There's more nuance.
There's more nuance, there's more layers. I mean, we get it right from the season opener, while the kids are just cringing at the welcome. All the adults in the room are debating what the exact definition of communism is.
Right. So, well, consider this. By the time we got to season 5, the target demographic that started watching the show in 2010 is now learning to drive. So,
right. If you're 10 in 2010, then you're 15 in 2015.
Yeah, exactly. I think what happened is, yes, they started out with a very direct message. But the cool thing about that is that it didn't really overtake the story because they spent the previous 15 minutes of the episode showing exactly why. And then at the end they said, well, this is what I learned today. And I have no problem with that. And then later as the seasons went on, it's like, yes, you find yourself in a similar situation as you did to episodes prior, but now there's another factor involved that complicates the matter. So what do you do in this situation, or how do you yes, it builds on it, which is extremely useful to do, and that's especially as your audience ages, right? When we were at the finale party, Cordero pointed out, hey, kids that started watching the show when they were 11 can now legally have this shot of wine with us to celebrate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Personally, I think it shows that they got more confident in their storytelling, that they no longer needed the crutch of having to say the Aesop at the very end. I think it just showed that they felt like the story themselves could tell the message, even if now and then they would just straight up say it at the end. But more often than not, if I remember right, a lot of times the stories just told the moral itself instead of having to say it outright.
I think they were running out of direct morals to state at the end of the episode without getting into repeats. And also so that they're like, well, we've kind of run out of things to be like, and this is the moral at the end of the episode. So and then a way to transition away with that is like, well, we have Twilight is a princess herself, so why would the Princess Twilight need to send a message to Princess Celestia about what she's learned when she's already ascended to her own princess status? So it's like, well, we could just transition it to Twilight is now kind of her own Princess Celestia, so she does both roles now. She's both in a learning role and a teaching role, which was like the transition period from season 5 to the end, where she fully ascends to the throne. So instead of writing letters to Princess Celestia, she kind of just analyze it with herself and the audience in a more subtle way. And again, that also goes with the audience aging up and growing with it. I think it really kind of seamlessly all worked together. Like, it solved a problem. It worked with the demographic aging up with it, and the story made sense. Like, well, why would she write to Princess Celestia? She's Princess Twilight.
Okay, so we got a question here from Rusty Helm that I want to tackle real quick. It says, Brony, quick question. What's the difference between stereotypes and culture? And let me just say this real quick and then see how many people agree or disagree with me. The difference between stereotypes and culture: stereotypes are a caricature of culture.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
Yeah, I would say, stereotypes are like a shortcut in the brain, not necessarily a reflection of reality.
Yeah.
There's no context or nuance, or even understanding of culture in a stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
It's so surface level and basic and simplified.
Mm-hmm.
It makes assumptions.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
that's why they can be harmful.
Does anybody else have any audience questions that they saw and wanted to tackle before we get to the end here?
Here's the Paladin Pony repeated himself. How do you ever see any dark messages in story, and do you think they are needed or not? So I guess he's asking, are there dark messages, or when have we seen dark messages in story? Plenty.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, there's plenty in Friendship is Magic. They're everywhere. It just depends on the outlook that happens. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes life sucks, and sometimes horrible things happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's that, oh, God, what was that? Was it the Kessler run from Star Trek? Is that what they called it? Or was it...
Did you just say the Kessler run from Star Trek?
Yes, I did, because I'm an ignorant casual.
From Star Trek.
It was from... Well,
Star
that was
Wars.
Star Wars.
That's worse than casual.
What was...
Kessler's not a thing.
What
Kessel
was...
is a thing.
Okay.
Just say, haha, I'm joking. So please just say, haha, you got you.
No, I'm a filthy casual, and I will admit to my flaws, okay?
It's so bad.
What was it called in Star Trek when Kirk needed to go through that exercise at the very end of the academy that was impossible
the Kobayashi
to do?
Maru.
Kobayashi Maru. You know something? I've heard that word before.
Star Wars. Remember when Luke ascended in the Kobayashi Maru at the end of that?
and then gained the Master Sword and went off to slay the Jabberwocky. I know, and Gandalf was there the whole time.
Hey, shiny.
Yeah. So here's.
And then Dumbledore said, "Use the Force."
Yeah, exactly. So the point is, the Kobayashi Maru, if I remember correctly, the point of that was make peace with sometimes you're just going to lose and there's nothing you can do about it.
The no-win scenario. Yeah.
Yeah. That in it, and that has its practicalities. You know, there's also the time that and this one I know was when Picard said, you know, sometimes you can do everything right and still fail. And still, you know, not win. That's not failure. That's just life.
It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness. That is life.
Yes, thank you. You know, how to tell when somebody only watches something through memes. Anyway, yes, so dark messages can happen, and if anything, they serve that purpose of helping you become at peace with the horrible things that might happen, or help you find a way around it. You know, depending on you know what there is, and sometimes it can Actually, I don't know what else to add to that, because somebody
Kirk didn't believe in the no-win scenario. That's why he cheated on the I almost said the Kessler run. you freaking on the Kobayashi Maru is he didn't believe in the no-win scenario. So that's why the Star Trek one is so cool and nuanced in the way they did the story. Is like, yeah, that's very important. Hey, sometimes you can't win, and you need to be able to accept that, and you need to be a good commander, you need to understand that no-win scenario is out there. But Kirk's philosophy was, if the no-win scenario is looming over my mind, and I believe that there's a situation out there that there's nothing I can do, that me and my people are dead or whatever, that will make me a worse commander. If there's something out there that I can't get out of and there is no winning, then so be it. Que sera. Then it'll happen when it happens. But if I believe that it's out there, I'm going to be looking for it. So I need to believe that there is no-win scenario. I don't believe in that. I can get out of anything. And if I think that will make me a better commander. That was actually an argument in philosophy that they told through the story of Kirk deciding to cheat on the Kobayashi Maru, and with his famous line, "I don't believe in the no-win scenario."
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because it makes me think of a philosophy. You know how people say live every day as if it may be your last? Mm-hmm. There's the opposite theory of live every day assuming that you're going to live forever, and then one day you'll be wrong.
Yeah. That's it. That's the two philosophies right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly a strange thing that you bring up the Kobayashi Maru, because while Kirk never faced the no-win scenario of sorts, well, his successor Picard certainly did.
Mm.
Yep.
Where Picard got out of it? Picard also got out of everything one way or another. What was Picard's name?
Really? Exhibit A.
He didn't get out of his own series.
Yeah.
No. Well, let's go with Chain of Command, where he is captured and tortured by the Cardassians, and constantly told, you will say there are 5 lights shining in your face, even though there are absolutely 4.
And how many lights did he say there were?
He said there were 4.
Never
However,
broke. He never said there are 5 lights. He stuck to it, and he got out of that. So that wasn't a no-win scenario.
But
at the end, he believed that there were 5. He told Counselor Troy that later.
Yeah, he said that to Troy, but it didn't happen. It's very important story-wise that he never said it. Sure, he can say that to Counselor Troy afterwards, like, I believe I could see 5 lights. He can say that afterwards, but the fact that he never opened his mouth and admitted it is important narratively and thematically that he didn't say it. So that means that he wins. If he had said there are 5 lights, even though he gets to go home and be a commander again, he would never be the same. He would be broken. The Cardassian commander wins, and it would have affected Picard's character for the rest of the series because he never quite broke. He got saved from breaking it. You can argue he got saved from breaking it at the last minute. That means that Picard wins, and he gets to stay himself. He did not lose a part of himself in that torture camp. He got to leave with all himself. If he had left some of himself behind.
It sounds like he did a
longer, though. Who knows?
Yeah,
well, who knows, but didn't.
I gotta say this, guys. It sounds like he did a pretty good job of keeping up with the Cardassians.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You win. Worst joke.
I'm broken 3 times tonight. This is my punishment for being late.
Four if you count the Kessler Run thing I did a second ago.
That's true. Oh my god. I can't handle it.
There actually is an example that comes to mind to me about what could be considered a dark message, and surprisingly, it comes from Dragon Ball Z.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which is most likely completely unintentional because Akira Toriyama does not do that crap. But it comes from the Cell Saga with Gohan. Throughout the series, Gohan hates fighting. He knows he has to fight, but he hates fighting. He's basically a pacifist, as the abridged series makes him.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, he's put to the point where, despite everything that he believes, he has to toss it aside for people to live. He has to basically destroy what makes him himself to reach that next level with enough power to win for other people. And Gohan never really is the same after that. Whether it's bad writing or not, it's still a big change in his life that affects him all the way throughout to the end of his days.
It does. You get to like later Buu Saga and Super though. He seemed to come out on top in the end, but yeah, that did mess him up for quite a while, and he regressed a lot too.
Mm-hmm. Probably as a reaction to it, from having to break his code, from having to break through all that.
Listen, he had to dive into conferences to escape, from all of the existential dread of that fighting.
I bet that's why he moved to the city.
Yeah, more conference.
Get me away from this place.
Yeah.
Videl, let me use your father's money.
All right. Did anybody else see anything in the chat that they wanted to tackle before we end the stream here? I'll take that as a no. Robbie, you didn't see anything?
I was too focused on the debate. I have trouble focusing on more than one thing at a time, especially when it's new things.
Yeah, I think we got him.
Okay. But yeah, Raby, it was great to have you on tonight. Thanks for joining us. You did a wonderful job.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for coming with me.
Yeah. So let's see. That was a fun topic. It was everything I hoped it would be. Alisia, who suggested the topic tonight, if you're out there listening, thank you for this topic. Hopefully we lived up to your expectations. Sorry you couldn't join us tonight. If you would like to get on this show, I'd love to have you. I would just like to get you on my Patreon for as little as $1 a month, where you get into the server. We hang out there, and your topic suggestions take priority. And I invite you on the show if we pick your topic suggestion. If you're not on the Patreon, you can still Send me topic suggestions through Twitter, email, Tumblr. All that stuff is in the listed in the description. I'm very grateful to all of my very generous supporters on Patreon that make my content easier to produce and my bills easier to pay, especially those on the $10 and up tier, where I get to read off this big long list of names, such as Pony Cordero, who finally joined us for the back half of this stream, Mr. DJ Skywalker, who joined us tonight as well, and Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministries, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden Girder, Senko, Kyle Christensen, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, Princess Sunshine Sparkle, Bootleg Bard, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. They all have links to their own content in the description that I highly recommend checking out. And yeah, so real quick down the line here, one thing we learned tonight, DJ.
I think we just always got to remember, for all the storytellers out there, no matter how important your message is, if you ain't got a good story, it ain't gonna work.
All right. Bright idea. One thing you learned tonight.
See, Peter,
I'm sorry,
What?
say that again.
I learned that I probably need to see Predator.
Yep.
Great movie.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 recommend.
Cordero, one thing you learned tonight.
I learned that I need to set a 7:30 alarm on Brony Debates days.
All right.
Very, very, very important.
Yeah, and that was unlike you. I texted you everywhere and then even called you like, hey, are you coming? And couldn't get a hold of you. I was kind of thinking to myself, dang, did he get in a wreck or something? This is unlike him.
I got back from the store and we were just like going. Chris and I were just going to town making dinner, which dinner is going to be really good when I get over to it.
All right, sounds good. And Raby, thanks again for joining us tonight. One thing you learned.
The thing I learned is that messaging, I guess, can be too obvious. And if you tell, don't show, you're going to turn away your audience and not get your message across.
My work here is done.
Yep. And
But you didn't do anything.
I learned I learned that my definition of when a message is overtaking media is a little too narrow, and I could do for expanding it, mostly for when things have different themes than what they started out with. Because like we were talking earlier, my problems with Steven Universe. So that's something I learned about myself tonight. So thank you guys for coming on and showing me that. I also learned that I can't keep my science fiction media straight to save my life.
Hashtag Kessler Run from Star Trek.
Yeah, hashtag keeping up with the Cardassians.
Yes.
All right. So
This ship ran
Oh,
the
parsecs.
Kobayashi, this ship ran the Kobayashi Maru in less than 12 parsecs.
Yep, thank you for that, DJ. All right, say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
That's what I was waiting for. Thank you, DJ.